Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Faraji Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversations. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. First and foremost, President Biden has officially signed the Respect for Marriage Act to talk about the implications of having same-sex marriage and interracial marriage federally protected. We'll have that conversation. Also, let's talk about climate change in politics. We check in with the Environmental Defense Fund Action President to give us some insight about this latest report to show that the Arctic is actually getting warmer and stormier. We'll have that discussion. Later on, can we talk a little bit about Meg Thee Stallion and the Tory Lanez trial of her shooting that happened 2 years ago? Is she a victim or a perpetrator? What really happened? We'll discuss that. And then later on, I got to talk about this internet social media craze of horoscopes and asking the question, has social media ruined horoscopes and astrology? We'll have that discussion as well. So stay with us. A whole lot coming at you in today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Woo! Folks, welcome to the culture. Happy Wednesday, and thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversations. We got a lot to get to. But I'm so happy that you're able to join us today as we have these big discussions. A lot of ground that we plan to cover here today. So let's get started. First and foremost, let's talk about the big win, another big win for the Democrats, which is the signing of the Respect for Marriage Act. This is the bill, folks, that federally protects same-sex marriage and interracial marriage. And it has actually gone through and gotten the bipartisan support of both the House and the Senate from both Republicans and Democrats. And so it went to President Biden's desk where he had an official signing ceremony that was done, that was star-studded, that included a number of celebrities, including Don Lemon, Sam Smith, and many others who were very happy that this particular bill was signed by the president, and it institutionalizes what many people see as the progress of the larger institution of marriage. And so President Biden was very happy to sign the bill. 5,300 people attended the affair at the White House just a couple of days ago, and it was a situation that Democrats needed to have, especially in light of some of the other stalled pieces of legislation that has yet to go through Congress. But to get the bipartisan support, this was a win and sort of expected. Let's check in with our culture crew member today. She is a TV host. She is an attorney out of Florida. And she is a sister that has a great understanding of the topics and analysis. I'm always happy to check in with my sisters. Suzette Speaks. Sister Suzette, good afternoon. How you feeling today?
Hey, Faraji. How are you? Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, Suzette, let's talk about this bill, Respect for Marriage Act. This was sort of expected, even though it's a win for the Democrats, right? But it was sort of expected. But I think the surprising element of this whole process is that it got the bipartisan support that it did from both Democrats and Republicans in both the House and the Senate. The thing that I want to kind of key in on is this was actually a situation that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas really kicked off in the summer when that major decision, that historic decision about Roe v. Wade was overturned. And then he hinted at, hey, the courts are looking at this bill about same-sex marriage and interracial marriage. And I think that just lit a fire for a lot of people in this country. What's your take on that? Is my assessment right or wrong on that?
Absolutely. We didn't really believe Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas when he spoke before, but Democrats are definitely taking heed, and they pay attention to everything, every word that he utters now. He has become a senior member of the court. He let everyone know in no uncertain terms after Roe v. Wade was overturned that this might be a possibility for same-sex marriage. I do want to point out some of the historic just placement of this type of ruling in one generation, Faraji, from 1996 to now, less than 30 years, how far this country has come. When I look back at, watching Bill Clinton sign the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996, looking back at what at that time the politics and our social acceptance or lack thereof was when it came to same-sex marriage, and how within these 20 some plus years, the country has come quite a ways in terms of its political will to protect love between two individuals, no matter the gender. So it's very interesting to also watch this evolution politically from people who saw over 40 states right around 1996 when Bill Clinton signed this DOMA pass that marriage was only between a man and a woman, to now where we are is just quite astonishing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just share with folks what the president had to say. Just a little excerpt of what he had to say. Let's put that quote up, please, fam. Take a look at this. Now, we're talking about, again, this is the Respect for Marriage Act. It was for the first time enshrine same-sex and interracial marriages into federal law and allow the federal government to bring a civil lawsuit against anyone who violates the statutory rights of gay, lesbian, or interracial couples. The bill also notably repeals, as Suzette just said, the 1996 federal law, the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, which once defined marriage as between a man and a woman. Wow. This law and the love it defends strike a blow against hate in all its forms. And that's why this law matters to every single American, no matter who you are or who you love, said the president. Now, the signing of the law came with bipartisan support in Congress. Senate Republicans worked with Democrats to pass the legislation amid political worry that marriage equality could be overturned after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the constitutional right to an abortion this past summer. Now, Suzette, given that you are an attorney and you are in probably one of the most, I would say, the state of Florida that is always battling Washington, right?
Mm-hmm.
On anything, right? Everything. All right, let's keep it real. Everything.
Our governor is.
The governor. Okay. Ron DeSantis.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, because when you have like this pieces of like federal legislation, there, it's like what we saw with the Affordable Care Act, what we saw with other pieces of legislation. I'm suspecting that there will be a number of states that will try to take this to the courts, even on a statewide level, right? And I'm wondering, from your vantage point, do you see that happening? That now Republican controlled states, whether you're talking about Florida or Texas or wherever in the country, that in some of these Republican controlled states, they're going to push back. I remember Brother Roland sharing, and I forgot the guy. He represented the state of Mississippi. He was talking about abortion. He was like, "Yeah, for those who are in agreement with the Supreme Court, they can find a home here in Mississippi." I'm even thinking about the states like Mississippi. Do you think there were going to be a major pushback on this piece of legislation?
Absolutely. I think we have to be careful, because even though this federalizes the guarantee of recognition, this does not mandate that states have to allow same-sex marriage within their state borders. So we have patchwork now, and we'll continue to have a patchwork. All this does is prevent any state from not recognizing a legal marriage from another state. So therefore, if you were to go to some of these states which have this, again, opposition to this type of marriage, you are going to actually be protected federally, right? So now they'll have to say you get the same benefits or protections or whatever there is within that state. However, we're still going to have somewhat of a patchwork in terms of whether they're going to be allowed within each and every state of the union. But again, wherever they are allowed, they must be recognized by every other state. So there's kind of some gray area, especially when it comes to also religious freedom grounds. I think those will be tested. But yeah, we're still quite not all the way there. There's still a lot of unresolved parts of same-sex marriage that are left out in this bill.
Okay, so here's the other part. There's a lot of talk, of course, about same-sex marriage, but I'm not seeing quite as much talk about the interracial marriage side.
Yes.
of this conversation. Okay, so it's just not me then, Suzette.
No, I was gonna say we forgot about that part too.
Yeah. So how does that fit? Or is it just because interracial marriage and interracial couples and relationship, that's a little bit more acceptable than same sex? Are we at that place in this country too, do you think?
Well, now, but when Loving v. Virginia, was first settled by the Supreme Court, it was not. We take it for granted. We are now in a generation or a couple of generations beyond that first ruling where, again, it legalized marriage between races, because on the record, for a very long time in our country, people of different races could not get married. Sometimes we don't emphasize or want to even teach that history, Florida, but we're I think it's being understated sometimes when we are covering it, that they're not paying as much attention as to the interracial component as it is to the same-sex component, but it's just as important and vital that it receive federal protection.
It is just as important. It is just as important. And my thinking is, and we got to take a quick pause, but when we come forward, my thinking is that we're going to have to open up the conversations in a very, very big way, because not only is this being federally protected, I'm wondering, Suzette, and we could talk about this, what the impact it will have on the faith community, right? Where we see a number of churches and other faith institutions start to say, you know what, we're going to respect that, or is there going to be any pushback from the faith community on this situation here? So we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, folks, let's continue the conversation talking about President Biden signing the Respectful Marriage Act. What does that mean? We want to get your thoughts on this. Join us in the conversation. Post your comments in our chat, and let's continue to have the dialogue with Suzette Speaks and you. So stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
All right, folks, we have been talking about the President Biden officially signing the Respectful Marriage Act, which federally protects same-sex marriage and interracial marriage across the country. We've been checking in with TV host and attorney Suzette Speaks to give us her insight and analysis. And we want to hear from you. Make sure y'all join us in the conversation. Post your comments in our chat as we're streaming live on YouTube and in other spaces, and we would love to hear what you have to say. So for that, I want to bring you back into the discussion. When we're talking about this situation, right? Because this opens the door, I think, for a lot of conversation about the evolution of American government, especially when you're, as much as we like to believe, and I always thought this was ironic, Suzette, we always say in this country, you cannot mix church with state, right? Those are two separate things, two separate entities. However, when a candidate comes before the American people and professes profess what their faith is and how their faith has drives their decision making on bills, or how their faith guides them in their understanding of the world, it's like mixed messages, right? So my thinking is, when we're looking at this bill, which I think in some ways shows where we are as a country, but it's still very sensitive topics, because you're talking about interracial marriages, and you're talking about marriages that are no longer deemed just between a man and a woman. You're talking about marriage that could be between two men and two women. And it may be even includes those who may not identify to a particular gender. Right. So how does the faith community, how do you think they're going to respond to a situation like this?
Okay, well, I want to add with the part of our Constitution that talks about separation of church and state. It tells us that there shall be no established faith by the government, right? We have a freedom to practice whatever we choose. But again, we do not have the right to impose our faith beliefs on anyone else. And I think that's where the real meat of this discussion or evolution has been, whether or not you believe in something and whether you think you should impose your belief on someone else who wants to live their life by different rules, by different faith or no faith at all. I think that has been a difficult conversation in a predominantly Christian, Judeo-Christian country, where it has been kind of unspoken that most people for a very long time tended to follow the same kind of religious rubric for how to live their lives. But people have changed. People have now decided that there are different ways in which we can walk through this world and want the right to be able to do that. So this question becomes whether you want to allow someone else their freedom to be who they choose to be or not. Now, I grew up in the Methodist Church. There is a vote going on even right now, and many other religious fellowships have had the same type of decision making. That is whether to stay with a very hardline conservative viewpoint of their, holy gospels or their holy books, which they believe state that there should only be marriage between men and women, or whether there are a group of churches that want to separate and have same-sex marriages allowed, gay or lesbian priests and pastors, etc. And it is a very, very, I want to say, heartfelt discussion being had. There are people like our congresswoman who spoke during this vote. I think she was from Missouri. I can't think of her name right now. Who on the House floor was almost in tears, saying, "Please, colleagues, don't vote for this. Don't vote for this." And I think she was probably being very genuine in what she felt was going to, quote unquote, destroy the fabric of our society and destroy our country. It's still an unsettled piece of business, I think, within many religious communities, where you're going to have people that are for and against, and they both feel, very strongly, and that actually that they're using their holy books to defend their positions.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm glad you brought that piece of that clarity up. There's no established order between church and state. Like, the government cannot tell you how to believe.
Absolutely.
That we all have the right to choose, what our belief system will be, which is, again, and when you really think about the laws that run this land, the laws that are on the book, and I'm talking about not just the state, I'm talking about on the federal side, right? And I always tell people this, when you really look at it outside, and I know it's kind of hard for us as Black folks to step outside of the oppressive space that we find ourselves in as a people in this country. But then some of these laws are really alike. Man, these are very, I would say, almost like divinely inspired laws to allow people to be who they are. You're not going to go to too many countries, not to say that no country doesn't have these laws, but I don't think you can go to too many countries in this modern world that will give you the same level of freedom
that
America gives to its citizens. And I may be completely wrong.
No, this is the American experience.
I'm talking about basic freedoms of speech, expression, you got the right to bear arms in some cases.
Speak against your government.
Against your
protest. We take it for granted that we could even protest. We are so, it is almost like the privilege, I call it, because in so many countries, the government will snatch you up. You will become a disappeared person. You know how many people in different countries are disappeared, meaning their families have never heard from them ever again because they oppose the government. Look what we're even seeing in Russia and other places. Those who are against that war that's happening over there. The type of democracy that we have to remember that there is a freedom of religion, and there's also a freedom from religion. I think sometimes we want to leave out the latter because we are so strongly rooted in our beliefs. But again, those type of conversations must happen in the public square. But as far as the government goes, we have to remember, marriage is what is defined here in these laws, is what is recognized by the government. Right now, as it stands, and we may have test cases in the future about it, whether or not there are church rulings, if you will, where people will have to marry people. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, not with the climate the way it is. But yeah, it's very difficult sometimes to understand that allowing people to live their lives maybe in a way that you don't agree with is also a part of us observing this ideal of freedom and justice for all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just take a couple comments from our online culture crew, Suzette, because folks are checking in. And folks, we would love to hear what you got to say. Janelle, you said, I think Congress added interracial marriage in the bill because SCOTUS is the Supreme Court of the United States. It's coming for all precedents, and many states still have crazy laws on their books. You know what? I mean, and I'm glad that you brought this up, Janelle. Do you think that's what happened, or is it just because same-sex and interracial marriages from a legal standpoint is still something that people find themselves being penalized for in specific states?
Perhaps not actively being pursued in terms of any type of repercussions, legally speaking. But I agree with Janelle. We'd be surprised what still remains on our books as far as legal ideology, right? And what is still very much in effect if we were to go back and look up these laws. Sometimes when we think about even property covenants, I know a lot of them, I've seen them and read them here in Florida, where in neighborhoods, there are parts of the covenant that say you cannot sell to non-white people. Like that's still on the books. So I do think Janelle has a point where there are some kind of laws that are kind of like sleeping on the books that we're not really aware of, that if somebody really wanted to, could go back and point to and say what you're doing is illegal. So I think it was just the uniformity. It was just trying to make it, a countrywide standard such that if the Supremes were going to try to touch it again, we would at least have an act of Congress in place.
Absolutely.
Supreme Court. I'm sorry. I love to call them.
No, right. Supreme Court. Right. Lenora, you checked in and you said, look, I just don't understand who someone chooses to marry is anyone else's business. The GOP is always talking about freedom. Government should stay out of our lives, etc. Such hypocrites.
This is difficult to respond to, Miss Lenora, because they would say there are hypocrites on both sides. Stay out of my business. Right. Sometimes, don't apply across the board. Okay, we're just talking about marriage right now. But no, I do think people do have a very strong religious beliefs sometimes that are tied to what they think should be public policy. But then thankfully, there are others that say just because it's your belief doesn't mean it has to be what I subscribe to or what the country's laws subscribe to. But again, if you don't want to be involved in gay marriage, don't marry anybody that's gay. If you don't want to be an interracial, you don't have to do those things. Like the part of you should live your life and have these conversations in the public square. If you want to convince your fellow American, then have those conversations. But for right now, I think it is the best means of protection that the Biden administration could have come up with to protect it again from what may be happening in terms of this activist Supreme Court that we have right now.
And just very quickly, all laws don't have to apply to every person in the country. You know what I mean? There are some groups of people that need to have certain levels of protection, while other groups of people, they don't. You know what I'm saying? So, we're just very quickly, we could talk about a conversation about reparations, but that applies to Black folks, right? Versus you're not talking about reparations for white people. You're not talking about reparations for Latino people. You know what I mean? So, that is one of the big things about politics, is that you're trying to figure out policy that will equalize everyone or bring some level of equal footing for all, when you know that certain groups have been marginalized more than others. So to your point, Suzette, right. You know what I mean? These laws have to protect all people, and it's not always granted. So it is interesting. But the president signed this bill, and I'm happy that the bill is signed, and at the same time, I'm kind of waiting to see what kind of pushback we can expect, because the GOP going to push back.
Oh, they're going
to
be
the other GOP who agreed to the bill is going to be like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. We were just whatever.
Playing games.
A lot of games. All right, look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to switch gears. Let's talk about the environment. We're going to be checking in with the Environmental Defense Fund Action President, Mr. David Kiev, to talk to us about the latest report about the Arctic and so much more. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. All right, let's talk about the environment. And there has been a lot of discussion about climate change here in the country as we are experiencing a variety of meteorological changes and from the East Coast to the West Coast. And many people are saying that not enough is being done, even after there have been numerous conversations, billions of dollars have been spent, and more importantly, awareness campaigns all across the board have been created to bring people to understand the importance of protecting and preserving the environment. And yet we're still find ourselves running against the clock to try to make some dramatic changes. So today we wanted to have a discussion about environmental defense as we check in with the Environmental Defense Fund Action President, Mr. David Kiev, to give us some insight as to what we're seeing, how serious is the threat that is looming, and so much more. We want you to join us in the conversation in a moment as well. And we continue to have this conversation with Culture Crew member Suzette Speaks. But let's bring in David. David, thank you so much, sir, for joining us this afternoon. How you feeling?
I feel great. I'm delighted to be here with you, and I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First and foremost, David, let's talk about the work that you do with the Environmental Defense Fund Action as you serve as the president. Talk to us. What does, and I've gone onto the website and I've seen some of the things that you guys have have championed and advocated for. But talk to us a little bit about the work of EDF.
Sure. The Environmental Defense Fund, I'm still relatively new to it. I've only been here about 10 months, is among the most respected, strongest voices in the country, and is expanding so that they've got a more national presence now than they ever have before on environmental issues in the nation. Their focus has always been through a lens of is it what science and economics tell us are the right things to do. I'm at a tiny little corner of the Environmental Defense Fund. I'm at EDF Action, which is the advocacy partner to the Environmental Defense Fund. So I help lead all of our efforts on engaging with lawmakers on the Hill and in state houses, and also our campaign arm, our engagement in elections to try to elect folks who are going to do the right thing, or at least try to do the right thing on climate. It's been an exciting 10 months or so since I joined, and I've learned every single day and have been delighted to be here. And we've also seen great progress with both the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act over the summer and had a better track record of helping to make sure that climate champions stayed in Congress, stayed in the U.S. Senate, were returned to state houses, and in some cases have a new opportunity to make progress to address the climate crisis.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I certainly want to talk about the, this idea of being a climate champion, because I actually love that term, David. So, how we can get to be that place. But before we even get into that part of the discussion, I'm interested. You were actually pivotal in helping President Biden getting into office, especially helping him to understand some of the nuances of the conversation around climate change. First and foremost, are you happy with the Biden administration? And that might be a biased answer. I'm sure that there's going to be some bias in it, but with the way things are going and how this administration is handling the discussion around climate change and other environmental issues, are we on the right track here?
Oh my gosh, I could not be happier with the legislative progress that we have been making over the past couple of years. The Inflation Reduction Act was the largest investment in our nation's history in addressing the climate crisis. Most folks don't know this, but the second largest investment in the nation's history in addressing the climate crisis also came under the Biden-Harris administration. It was the bipartisan infrastructure law that they passed. And the two laws work in tandem with one another and are going to get us really close to where we need to be, I think, in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which are fueling the climate crisis, and reducing the rate at which our planet is heating, not at some distant point in the future, but over the next 10 years by 2030. So in terms of legislative progress, I could not be happier with some of the progress that we're making. And there's clearly more work to be done, and there's more work to be done on implementation. But remember, these two laws are very young. One of them was just signed into law a little over a year ago, and one of them is only a couple of months old. And the timetable for implementing them and for getting that funding out into the country and into our communities is over a 10-year time horizon. So they're just starting to kick in. And I think they're going to have a real impact on every community in the country, but especially on the communities that have been historically marginalized for reasons that you and your listeners know as well or better than I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talk to us a little bit about the element of race in this, because, for example, I'm in the state of California, and so we're seeing some progress being made. You talk about 2030, that law has been passed by Governor Gavin Newsom that by 2030, we're going to be phasing out gas cars and moving into more of the electric cars in space. But I do want to talk about the element of race in this situation, because Black folks in this country, unfortunately, have been at the brunt of environmental injustice. So talk to us about what the work of EDF and as you being the action president, what does that look like? How does that fit? How do you bring some level of justice to communities that have often been overlooked and marginalized?
It's a great question. It's one that we wrestle with every single day, and it's going to be really hard because to bring about environmental justice, you need to understand that environmental injustice is real, and you are correcting decades, if not hundreds of years worth of disparity, and that disparity occurred not by accident, but intentionally targeting and pointing at communities that didn't have a political voice of their own that they were able to lift up and raise. And that all too often meant communities of color, Black, Brown, Native American communities. So getting environmental justice right is going to be really, really hard, but it's also really critical. One of the things I mentioned, that the bipartisan infrastructure law already, one of the investments that makes, it's unprecedented, is $55 billion investing in clean water. What the President Biden believes, Vice President Harris believes, what I believe, what every single person at EDF and EDF Action believe, is that clean drinking water isn't a want to, it's an absolutely fundamental right for everyone in this country. And the fact that we failed to provide it for too many Americans, and too many Americans of color, and particularly African Americans, is a real failing of this country, and one that we can't wait another minute to correct and fix. So to me and to EDF, part of centering everything that we do around is focused on making sure that we don't try to speak for community voices, but that we use our resources to try to lift them up so that they can speak for themselves, and so that they can pull up a seat at the table.
Absolutely. One of our watchers, Roar Action, asked the question, does the EDF actively work with Black climate tech startups? And he wanted to know that he serves as the CEO of WICU, Roy Siwa. Is that a part of, are you bringing those type of voices to the table with EDF Action?
EDF is trying to. That's not within the purview of what we've been doing at EDF Action, particularly on the campaign and election side. We've been more focused on working our best to make sure that we re-elect climate champions. But yes, that is an area where this is a big place here at EDF, and be delighted to follow up and connect him with the right colleague of mine here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, when we're talking about this issue of environment, and I think that this is one of the big challenges for the work of any environmentalist out there, is like, how do you take a big problem and make it small enough where people can wrap themselves around it, can feel like they can become engaged in the solution part of the process, right? Because when you're talking about environments, you know, it can sometimes be like, oh, okay, that's not going to happen for another 100 years. You know, especially in communities that have been marginalized. You know, there are a lot of young people, of course, you know this, there are a lot of young people, Black, white, Asian, Latino, that are fired up about getting involved in climate change and environmental justice issues. But it's such a big issue. It's not a low-hanging fruit type of conversation or low-hanging fruit type of organizing effort. So how is that done? How do you bring those voices, young voices, marginalized voices that we don't often hear from, to be a part of a cause that is so big that seems to be years down the road before we can solve?
I think part of it is by striking the right balance and by letting folks know that the climate crisis isn't coming, it's already here. You mentioned that you're in California. If you were there a couple of Augusts ago, in August of 2020, you remember when purpleair.com became a household thing. You needed to check to see what the air quality was because of the historic wildfires that were ravishing the state before even setting foot outside. In Northern California, where my parents live, the sky was this strange gray orange in the middle of the day when it should have been bright and sunny because of all of the air pollution caused by the wildfires. If you live in the Gulf Coast in this country, you understand that you've been subject to terrible threat of life-ending storms on a year in and year out basis every hurricane season, but also that it's not just limited to specific geographies. If you're a farmer in the middle of the country, you might get an average amount of rainfall over a long period of time. But if all of that rainfall over a 3-month period comes in a 24-hour period, that doesn't do anything to help your crops. So the climate crisis isn't just coming, it's here. We need to take immediate action. But the good news is we're starting to take that immediate action, and we need more people to raise their voices to say, hey, here are some things that we can all do together to get this thing under control, because we've seen this challenge rising and getting worse and worse and worse without any government action for a generation.
Yep.
We're finally taking action, but now much more is needed much faster.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we'll continue the conversation with David Keefe of the Environmental Defense Fund Action, and we'll continue to get your thoughts. And certainly I'm going to bring back our Culture Crew member, Suzette. So join us. The more discussion is up next here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
We have been talking about the environment and climate change and politics. We've been checking in with our special guest today, Mr. David Keefe, who serves as the Environmental Defense Fund Action President, and giving us his insight about the work that EDF and EDF Action is doing to address the issue of climate change and address the issue of environmental injustice. And we want you to join us in the conversation. Post your comments and continue to have the discussion right there as you are part of our online Culture Crew. And we want to hear directly from you. Let's bring back our Culture Crew member, Suzette Speaks, and also David Keefe to continue this conversation for a little bit. Suzette, I want to give you an opportunity to join us and to pose any questions that you may have for David.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, David. I was just curious as to how you think the changing of the hearts and minds of those who have been staunch or even kind of, what should I say, skeptics when it comes to climate change has been going over even in the last maybe 5, 10, 15 years. I know there are many in Congress that are applauding the progress that we're making, but we still have a lot of Americans who I believe are denying the science. How do you think that is evolving, if you will, as we've been talking about same-sex marriage, et cetera, 30 years ago, we saw this, this leap into more acceptance. How do you think that's going when it comes to those on the GOP side and otherwise who are slow to come around to the realities of what's happening within our environment?
That's a fascinating question. I've got a couple of different approaches to an answer to it. Number one is if somebody has been a climate change denier, they're not going to get religion and see the light overnight. We may need to elect better elected officials who are better on those issues. But I'm also old enough to remember, as I think we all are, when there was an old sort of false choice offered between you could either do the right thing for the economy or for the planet. One of the things that gives me so much hope is that old false choice seems to be kind of out the window today. Specifically because the majority of American people understand that the jobs of the future are going to be in clean energy, and they want those jobs in their communities paying a family supporting wage. That's one big change that's happened just over the few years that I think has really powered a lot of the progress that we've been able to make. The second really big change that we've been able to make is voices from groups like mine have largely stopped talking about the changes that we need to make and what the things that we need to stop doing and started talking about the opportunity before people. It's way easier to tell somebody, hey, you know what you should do is get one of those new electric vehicles. And there's a great tax credit that's going to help make getting into it easier and more affordable for you and your family. And once you're in it, that car is going to perform better. It's going to break down less. And it's going to save you an awful lot of money, because the fact is that pain at the pump was an issue this election season. The best way to get rid of pain at the pump is if you don't have to go to the pump anymore.
That is true. And here's the other part about that, David and Suzette. It seems like, and I don't know, maybe this is just me because we live here in America, but it seems like everything that's natural, I'm speaking of natural resources, whether it's water or whether it's any natural resource or any natural phenomenon, it becomes a political conversation, right? And then it takes away just this idea that we are all living on the same earth. It takes away this idea that we all breathe in the same air. We're all like in this whole idea of we're all in this together. And it just seems like, oh, well, this is the Republican side. This is the Democrat side. And you know, David, I'm like, damn, the environment don't have a political party. So why do we politicize this so much to the point where we see very little progress being made? We might get, you talked about the Inflation Reduction Act. We might get these major policies under one administration, but hell, if another administration comes into power, we get very little. And you know, and I'm thinking to myself, isn't environmental justice, isn't climate change, aren't these universal issues enough where we're going to say, let's put all of this partisan bickering to the side and let's come up with some solutions? I just don't understand that, David. Maybe you can help me.
I don't understand it either, in part because EDF Action is a proudly bipartisan organization. We've got Republicans, independents, and Democrats alike on our board. We've spent a lot more time and a lot more money working to elect Democrats in recent years than Republicans, because Democrats have been better on climate than Republicans have. But we hope to get to a place where we can support more Republicans for office because they're better on our key issues. So my hope is that
Wait a minute, let me make sure I understand. You're saying Republican, you know, I'm just asking, David. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying you're saying Republicans are better on certain environmental issues rather than Democrats?
No, I'm saying that they have some work to do to get to a place where they can earn the support of groups like mine, but that we're committed to earnestly hold the door open so that when they do that work and when they rise to a level of deserving our support, that we can step up and be there. So we want to hold that door open for good Republicans to walk through and come through, because you're right, the country is too divided. EDF Action, when I talk to our board members, we set aside our differences and focus on what we have in common to try to make progress. And if we can do it, almost anybody else could as well, from my view, because we're not anything that special.
Not at all. Not at all. All right, let me get some comments from my online culture crew. Conscious Thought, you checked in and said environmental racism is sadly not as emphasized as all other forms of racism. There's Cancer Alley in Louisiana and others. Suzette, have you ever heard of Cancer Alley? I've
Absolutely.
never heard of
we have them here in Miami, Fort Lauderdale areas as well. A lot of times dumping, or where there was high pollution areas, or when we were building the interstate highway system, various all kinds of legislation from our federal government literally parted the land, built right over Black communities, forming these areas where people became very sick, where there were a lot of pollutants allowed in the environment, etc. So this has to be corrected. I think that when we talk about reparations and however hopefully the conversation goes, we can start to put this layer as a portion of what we try to address and remediate.
Absolutely. David, what's your take on this? Environmental racism is still not emphasized. You got Cancer Alley. I'm thinking about pipelines going through, different parts of the Dakotas and in other areas where a lot of residents, marginalized communities really don't have a say. Corporate interest takes more precedence. And take a look. This is from ProPublica, Cancer Alley, where toxic air is about to get worse. What do we do about this level of racism that is backed by corporate property, corporations and lobbyists, and it's often seem like it's not on the radar for a lot of people?
Yeah, it's not my way to brag on my work or EDF Action's work, but I have one specific thing that I can point to about what EDF Action is helping to do right now to address the problems in Louisiana and elsewhere. Election season didn't end for us on November 8th. We participated in 2 special elections. A week ago yesterday, we had staff and team members on the ground who were thrilled to be helping Reverend Warnock win a full 6-year term in Georgia in the runoff election for the U.S. Senate. And then last Saturday, December 10th, just a few short days ago, there was a runoff election for a Public Service Commission race in Louisiana, where we were so proud to support a challenger for office named Devontae Lewis, a community activist from Baton Rouge, who was elected to represent Public Service Commission district, and we'll oversee utility rates and other things stretching from New Orleans to Baton Rouge and encompassing what's known as Cancer Alley. Devontae has made the point to me and to others, wouldn't it be great to have a public service commissioner who puts people first, who asks, what can I do to alleviate challenges in this area, and stands up for people rather than corporate interests? So that's one thing that we're doing that's hyper local, that's exactly addressing the concern that you and your viewers have raised. And we're proud of what we're doing. We know there's a lot more work to be done, but we're going to keep at it until we get it right.
That's what I'm talking about, David. We got like 30 seconds. How can a person, join the work of EDF Action, becoming a climate champion?
Excellent. Well, they can get out. They can talk to their friends and neighbors. They can talk to their coworkers. They can talk to their family. And they can go to edfaction.org to learn more about our group and sign up. The unifying theme for our efforts this campaign season wasn't, hey, look at us, look at how great we are. It was Climate Voters Unite. So because when we speak with one voice, we gain political power and gain influence and force people to pay attention to what we're doing. We need more of that. So we invite every single person who's out there watching, if you care about climate, if you recognize the impact that we're having on our planet, join EDF Action today at edfaction.org and find ways that you can be a loud voice for change in your community.
There it is right there. David Keefe, we appreciate you as you represent EDF Action, Environmental Defense Fund Action. You are serve as the president and as a voice and advocate for the environment. David, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us today here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's continue the conversation. Let's talk now about, let's go into the world of culture as we talk about the Tory Lanez trial. This is the gentleman that was with Meg Thee Stallion that shot the hip hop artist a few times in her foot. We'll break down what the trial, how the trial started and what we can expect. So we'll have that conversation. And then later, let's talk a little bit about some other things that I got for you. I got some stuff for Trends Post and Dornamo. So stay with us. The next hour is going to be fantastic. You're tuned into The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Faraji Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right, folks, let's talk about something in the world of hip hop and arts and culture. Now, one of the big storylines that are happening this week is the trial of Tory Lanez, who is a hip hop R&B star who was on trial for a number of charges relating to the possession of a firearm that was fired while he and hip-hop superstar Meg Thee Stallion were in a vehicle together, which struck her a couple of times in her foot. Now, this is a situation that happened back in December of 2020, if y'all remember, and has been a part of the ongoing discussions about Meg being a liar. We wanted to talk a little bit about this because it's interesting. The trial started this Monday of this week. And now, Meg Thee Stallion has put it out there that this is a very, very traumatic experience, even though the narrative about her involvement is still sketchy, whether she caused the situation to happen or she was just the victim. So let's talk a little bit about this, but I want to share with you something that was reported about the LA Times as this trial it goes underway. Take a look at this, folks. This is the report about this whole situation. On the morning of December 13th, Megan Thee Stallion, real name Megan Pete, took the stand in a Los Angeles courtroom, according to the LA Times. When asked if she was nervous, she replied, "I just don't feel good. I can't believe I have to come in here and do this." Now, the defense attorney for her for George Megdesson stated that the case was all about jealousy, while prosecutor Alexander Bott argued that the two rappers got into an argument after Meg and Pete derided Peterson's, which is Tory Lanez's real name, Daystar Peterson, rap skills. Following the argument, Pete allegedly asked to be let out of the car before Peterson then shot 5 times at her feet. Wow. Take a look at this. This is the Tory Lanez trial begins. Megan Thee Stallion had to testify. And if you've been keeping up on this story, folks, you know this has been one of the soft spots for Meg Thee Stallion, because people have been saying, oh, she's lying, or wasn't that big of a deal. And the situation has gotten way out of hand. It's been talked about in a couple of songs from major artists, including Drake and DaBaby. I mean, it's just been crazy. So let's bring back our culture crew member for the day, Suzette Speaks, who is a TV host and attorney. Suzette, this is something you wanted to bring up. You were like, Faraji, I think we need to discuss this.
This is something.
And I'm all for the culture, Suzette. So I'm like, let's go. Let's go.
All right, for all the hotties out there.
Not the January 6th hearing, but
no, this is not January 6th at all. This is taking us into the realm of hip hop, and some would deem hip hop, royalty when it comes to the success of Megan Thee Stallion. One thing I want to put out there, and I've heard it said, although this is the trial, or this is being called in the media the trial of Megan Thee Stallion, she is not on trial, right?
She's not on trial.
She was the victim. All right, we're going to say it in air quotes, because we have to go by what the facts have to offer. And just based on what has begun this week on Monday with the opening statements, there are two very different, divergent stories about what happened and why. So this is where I'm going to speak in terms of allegedly, because we don't know who pulled the trigger. According to one side, it was one person, and according to another side, there was doubt. So we're going to wait on witness testimony. Ms. Pete, Megan Thee Stallion, took the stand, yesterday, and explained uninterrupted for about 45 minutes what exactly happened according to what she firsthand experienced. Of course, we're going to wait on other testimony as well, because you have a defense witness list that is quite interesting, including the likes of Corey Gamble. That's Kris Jenner, Kim Kardashian's mother's boyfriend, and they're going to talk about whether there were arguments happening at the party that took place before this incident. Of course, all of them were together, quite a few people at Kylie Jenner's party. And again, this took place after. There were 4 people in the vehicle. So we want to hear from, I don't know if it's, I'm characterizing her relationship with this young lady, Kelsey, who is a best friend / assistant, et cetera, et cetera. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but they are all going to, I don't know if Mr. Lanez is going to take this stand. I'd be interested to see if he does. But this is very serious. He's facing over 20 years if convicted of shooting at somebody. So there is now facts that have been kind of presented, at least remarks made during opening statements, that there was residue on both Megan's friend's hand as well as Mr. Lane. That's gunshot residue. Of course, we know there were 5 shots that were purportedly fired. Again, whether they ricocheted off the ground into Megan's leg, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see maybe testimony from maybe even a medical professional who treated her, maybe even the security guard that was in the car. So we have a lot of moving pieces that are still kind of uncertain. What we're going to see here is there is going to be a question of credibility, and I can see already the defense attorney, Tory Lanez, picked a good one here, as far as what he's trying to lay out is that Megan is not a credible person, that she had to be looked at twice because there are discrepancies in her story. Of course, we remember, if you follow this story, Gail, Oprah's best friend, Gail, her last name slips me right now, interviewed Miss Megan Thee Stallion. Gayle King, thank you. Megan said she did not have intimate relations with Mr. Tory Lanez. Now on the stand yesterday, she said she did have intimate relations with him. So whether or not you see this as Megan being not truthful, the real question is, and I don't want people to kind of get off of the real charge here, which is whether someone shot at another individual, right? Had an illegal possession of a weapon, and whether they shot, whether negligently, I think is the third charge that has now been levied against Mr. Lane.
Gross negligence.
Gross negligence, maybe, accidental, but without intent to harm. We have to really be careful that we're not kind of getting sidetracked and kind of like the Hollywood, which I say ambiguity of the hot girls versus, the Tory Lanez fans. There are other people who are also framing this as a way to highlight a domestic violence or domestic disturbance or a domestic relationship in which there are, many people who suffer at the hands of romantic partners. So I'm not sure if that is in fact the case in this case. Again, I need to hear more evidence. I'm reading transcripts and of course newspaper articles secondhand. There are no cameras allowed in this courtroom, but you're seeing what is going on indirectly.
So all right, for we call it the culture, so we're going to talk about this, right? Because it's gotten beyond just he say, she say, TMZ stuff. It's gotten beyond social media banter. Is now in a court of law, right? Tory Lanez is looking at some serious time. His career, I mean, depending on what you think of his career, like any continuation of his career could be effectively over if this trial doesn't go in his favor.
He could be deported even.
He could be deported. I mean, right. So when you're talking about this case, like, why is this case important for us to even look at? Even though I think there are some key narratives or there's some key like storylines within this story that I think we need to look at, because one is the ongoing discussion about artists and the use of guns. There have been a number of artists, hip hop artists, that have lost their lives as a result of gunplay. So that's there. Two, this really could have gone from bad to worse. If the gun was not downward to shoot her foot and it was upward to shoot her in the chest, you're talking about in the back of a vehicle. So you're talking about close proximity. This really could have been a fatal situation, right? So there's that point. There's the other point of the emotional impact of this whole situation. And Real Brooklyn, you brought this point up. You said, I find it kind of ironic that Megan is emotionally affected when she makes lyrics about guns and stuff. The only pushback I would have in Real Brooklyn, you my God, the pushback I would have is they all are emotionally affected when the art becomes too real.
Absolutely. Something just happened to Kalani like that. Another singer, if you guys follow her, she has overtly explicit sexual lyrics, and someone, she says, allegedly sexually assaulted her, put their hands under her
and it
clothing.
Doesn't justify it.
Right. And she's saying, even though my music that says X, Y, and Z does not mean in real life
me or sexually assault
you can come in my concert and violate me. So I would take a little bit of umbrage with that when it comes to saying, well, don't sing about it. It's a part of culture at large, and it's a part of maybe her reality, I don't know, or others that she's associated with. But the point is that there was somebody who, and we don't know who yet, because again, I want to say allegedly shot, because again, his defense is going to raise the possibility that there may have been other shooters. Their opening statement stated there was 5 DNA samples on this weapon. Again, residue on 2 of the persons that were in the back of the car. I just think that for the culture, we have to really be careful that we're not caught up in the triviality and like the Hollywood stardom of, whether there was a lot of talk about who Megan has been with intimately and whether her and the other young lady in the car were fighting, or if this was a tussle for, other reasons outside of her having an argument directly with Mr. Lanez about his career, et cetera, as she has said. Where we are right now, I still kind of want to hold tight and see what other evidence comes out, because again, I think sometimes the sensationalism of it, again, a very famous, very provocative and beautiful young lady who has been at the heights of what would be hip hop stardom is saying somebody shot at me. So we have to really be careful. Again, we have to place the importance of why he's being charged in the context of like all the sensationalism. Because again, it's very, sordid. It's like, oh my goodness, all the Hollywood types are involved. And was it a love triangle? Was it a he said, she said? Well, all they have to prove is that he was the one who pulled that trigger. Right. So for whatever reasons, and there's, again, the defense is going to do, and I can already tell, quite a thorough job of trying to pick apart Miss P in all the ways that, again, her testimony now may differ from statements that she's made in the public. We got to be very careful. Y'all, first things first, when you're making initial statements to police, lawyer up. When I see people kind of, again, you're afraid. And I think we also have to acknowledge that a lot of people change their stories depending on what they think the police might do. They might think they're even protecting another person.
The police, look. Hey, Suzette,
and remember, this was in the summer of George Floyd.
I know it might not sound corny. I don't want to sound corny. Be like, I watch TV, so I know what goes on. Right?
Yes.
But
exactly, right?
I'm talking about them documentary style shows like First 48 and stuff. The police will be like, and I never understand why people don't take advantage of it.
You said everything you wasn't supposed to say, and then you say, I think I need a lawyer right now.
I think I need a lawyer now.
From the jump. I would like to exercise my right to remain silent.
How you doing, sir? I'm good, Mr. Muhammad. Can you tell us what happened? Not until you give me a lawyer.
Hello. Even that case with the FTX guy, Sam Bankman-Fried, who told you to go on all these shows? Who told you to go make this random publicity tour saying all kind of mess that the government is going to use against you now when they have the receipts? So we have to be very careful. It's a lot of moving parts in this. So I don't want us to jump to conclusion. Again, it's kind of becoming a team Megan versus team Tory Lanez. She was also saying that she's afraid for her career, that if, she snitched or said something about someone else in the industry, that this might affect her. That's why she changed her story. But again, it's going to lie on credibility. And again, what the other witnesses have to say. There were other people in that car. So I want to hear what they have to say.
No, let me ask you let me do this. We're going to take a quick pause. When we come forward, I do want to get your take on this, Suzette, that, I don't know if Megan is putting herself in this position, but how do we, I mean, again, this could have gone left very quickly. So how do we not create an environment where a woman's word is questioned and doubted? You know what I'm saying? Especially in hip hop, right? Where women are often just kind of seen but not heard. Women are often used as props.
Objectified, yeah.
Objectified. We know all of these things, right? But I think this could possibly be a moment where we can have some different conversations within the culture, within the industry. They're saying, you know what? A woman's voice is important. She needs to be taken seriously. She needs to be listened to. And I'm wondering how that can be done. Folks, we're going to continue the conversation with Suzette. We want to get your thoughts on this as the trial of Tory Lanez, not Meg Thee Stallion. Tory Lanez begins this week. What's your take on this, on how a woman's view, a woman's word is being heard and listened to? Join me in the conversation and stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about the trial of Tory Lanez. This is the hip-hop R&B artist that is on trial for the shooting of Meg Thee Stallion, who that happened back in 2020, December of 2020. The trial has started this week, and we're looking at all of the implications and looking at all of the different elements of this trial and just what this case will do for a number of different conversations happening in the industry. We want you to join us right now. Post your comments in our chat on YouTube, on Facebook, on Black Star Network, and join us in the conversation as we talk about this. I've been talking about this with attorney Suzette Speaks, checking in from Florida to give us her take and analysis of this situation. Suzette, let's talk about one of the big things that Megan has been challenging a lot of male artists on, right? It's not just the fact that she has been intimate with some of these artists, right? You know, I came across some information where she was, the fight was about, you know, between her and her girlfriend about Tory, her best friend being with Tory, and then she was with somebody else. And that's not my concern. That's
allegedly.
Allegedly. Okay. Yes, you're absolutely right. You're the attorney on the panel. Yes, allegedly. All right. But the point is, my thinking is that's not my concern. You choose to be who you choose to be with. But I am concerned about this part of the woman's voice. Like if a woman tells her side of the story, whether she's believed or not. And this came up because, you know, there was a line that Drake, another major hip hop artist, used in one of his songs to describe Megan and how she's now being labeled a liar. And I'm thinking to myself, we're going down here a slippery slope, right? That a woman's voice will not be taken seriously, will not be considered. Here's Meg Thee Stallion, who is a superstar in hip hop world. She just catapulted to the top of the game, really beating a lot of men in the process, right? In terms of success and fame and just all of that stuff. But she's still a woman in the fact of her voice is not being heard, not being considered. She's being told a liar. How do we reconcile that? How do we make sure that that is not lost in this process? As crazy as the situation may be, there still has to be some assurance that women are going to be heard and not going to be taken for granted.
Yeah, I think it's not an accident that instead of focusing again on who shot at her, we're focusing on her respectability, who she been with, aka, you know, her body count, and, you know, whether she told the truth in certain scenarios. Now, I will say the idea that, you know, a woman's voice is often questioned much more quickly or non-believed or disbelieved is a pattern in terms of violence that we've seen, especially in our community, so that this may not sit well with many in our audience who know that, you know, there are so many people that experience what she's experiencing, right? I say something, I am not necessarily taken seriously, or I'm even marginalized, or I'm even being called out for behaviors that I was not responsible for. I didn't shoot myself. Someone else shot me. Nonetheless, there's going to be that devil's advocate that says, wait a minute, you know, in her case, it's a little different. She did give statements initially that are, she's being, you know, quite different. Her responses have changed, let's say, in terms of.
Well, that doesn't work in her favor.
Yes. And I think there are people that are going to nitpick at that and say, well, she's not a good representation of what y'all talking about when it comes to women being pushed off to the side. She is now, you know, putting herself in a category of being, you know, disbelieved. But for people who have suffered actual trauma, who have been through major traumatic scenarios like the one that she experienced, it is not uncommon for people to not tell the entire truth up front. I'm not justifying it. I'm not justifying what she did and why she did it, but I'm just saying there are cases that can show us, or I'm sure research is out there that can show us why people try to protect themselves first before they're putting out all this information or even coming to terms with what exactly happened to me and why. So those initial statements can be, you know, kind of foggy or even downright, I'm protecting myself. I'm protecting, you know, him. So I'm going to say I stepped on glass. I'm going to say I did it. But you know what I'm saying? After a time when you get to process it, sometimes your story does change. I'm not justifying that, but it's going to be something that especially the defense brings up over, and even folks who are not her on her side, even in the you know, public square, are going to say she a liar, but she was shot at. So I don't want us to confuse whether you think what she said or believes what she said was right or wrong or inconsistent of what of you. But you have to really go back to, we can't like let it distract us from, but somebody shot her or shot at her. And we need to get to the bottom of that because that is a crime. So I think there's
right. That's the crime.
Influence. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the crime because she didn't shoot herself.
Absolutely.
She
So
didn't
whether
shoot
she
herself in the foot, right?
him or I'm not again justifying it. I can see why a woman would do that though. I could see why you couldn't sit in front of Gayle King and be like, yeah, I slept with this dude. You know.
I mean, because first thing, I could only imagine if you come out and say, yeah, I had intimate relations with this guy who just shot you in the foot. So that question, that makes people question your judgment, right? And
or dismiss you altogether. Yeah.
And they go question you altogether. So I get it. And it reminds me, and I know I'm not going to take it back to this point, but Chris Brown and Rihanna. What, did I say something wrong?
It's an interest. I was trying to think of the comparison because I'm like, this is definitely not a Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. This is definitely not like I was, and that might be No,
I'm just using that.
Entirety of the situation, but just in terms of the violence, I get what you're saying.
Here's what I'm using it for. It's talking about the violence, and it's talking about who do you believe, right? Do you believe that Rihanna got upset and wild out on Chris? Or do you believe Chris said something and then, but you know what I'm saying? But the point is that, you got so many other pieces and layers of stuff that you have to get through in order to get to the truth. Because in that situation, you had two superstars in the same space at the same time where violence took place, right? And I'm speaking of Chris Brown, Rihanna. In this situation, Meg Thee Stallion is a little bit more higher on the totem pole than Tory Lanez is. And so because of her fans, because of her success, she is going to have a way more support. Then you, on the other side for Tory Lanez, you got the quote unquote bro code, right? Where,
listen, we don't love
anything protect the bros over these.
Yeah, I mean, but what is not being talked about, I think, and shout out to Sandy W in the chat. I see you, sis. When we look at these side issues, it really, again, is kind of a distraction from the main issue, which is he's being charged with possibly having shot someone in an argument for whatever reason, shot at somebody 5 times.
At close range, Suzette.
This could have been, as you pointed out, a whole different narrative had one of those bullets kind of, gone a different direction or a little higher. So I think this type of, attempt to disparage or ruin her credibility by again bringing up her partners or intimate partners and things like this. Again, these are side issues. These are red herrings. These are not necessarily going to lead to what is the real crux of the issue and the question at hand was, did you unintentionally shoot somebody? And if not, who did? So again, I'm not going to speculate because again, there's a lot more to come when it comes to the witness list. I would be very interested to see if Mr. Lanez is going to take this stand himself. I want to know if other people heard that there was also a voicemail left by Mr. Lanez allegedly on the Friends voicemail not long after the incident, saying that he would offer $1 million for silence or cooperation,
I read that today.
or for for what he did. He doesn't say on the voicemail what he did, but he apologizes. And again, there's a lot more information that is going to kind of come out. And I do think the defense especially is trying to, and even the media, some media outlets are trying to pit it as like a he said, she said, but I don't think they're looking at what, again, the jury has to answer whether or not he is guilty on these 3 counts, right? So all the other periphery as to why, and was she in an argument with them, and would it justify, etc. These charges, again, are sometimes a distraction from the main event. Again, it might work in the court of public opinion and have people, as you said, putting her career even in jeopardy, depending on the outcome of this case. But you got to be be very careful and focus on like what are the elements that they have to prove for the charges at hand. But again, the defense is going to try to cloud the judgment of the jury to understand that, you know, what someone thinks of you and the perception they have of you, even though it's not supposed to influence how they look at the case, they're supposed to look at the facts presented, right? And again, if there's a reasonable doubt, you know, he may not be charged. But again, there's still too many questions right now to make that judgment.
Absolutely. Let me go to Sandy W, because you gave her a shout out. Sandy said who she's been with shouldn't have been a factor. If he is an insecure man and had access to a weapon and used it, it should be the real issue. That's what it comes down to. He's probably insecure. He's probably drunk. He probably got in his feelings. Maybe she said something about his rapping skills. Maybe he's not that good of a rapper.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
No
saying?
matter who you are, you don't get to shoot at people. That's
the whole point. The whole point is you don't have the right to just shoot at people because they made fun of you. Sandy, thank you so much. Great point. Willie, you checked in and said, shoot me in my pinky toe. I'ma tell. Off of that $1 million, I might not say nothing.
Oh my goodness. Listen, y'all quit making fun of this. This is serious business. But your point will, Mr. Frazier, is very well taken.
You offer me $1 million, I might take it and then say something afterwards.
Yeah, this is a lot. It's a lot going on, y'all. I don't think we will hear. I hope we hear from the security guard that was in the car. I hope we hear what the friend has to say.
Former friend of Meg's.
Yeah.
That's what I read. I read that she's now a former friend.
Oh, is it?
Yes. It's not like her. It's not like everybody in the situation. Their relationship with Meg at this point has changed. Former bodyguard, former driver, former friend, and then you got her former lover. Whatever the case may be. And the sad part about it is this is not good for the culture unless we, the community, the hip hop community, those who love hip hop music and the culture, unless we have some different conversations, right? Because if we get into a space of saying, oh, okay, I'm Team Tory, I'm Team Meg, you know what I'm saying? I believe him, I don't believe. If we get into that space, then we're going to find ourselves not really gaining the lessons that we need to gain from this. I mean, there are issues of manhood. There are issues of violence. There are issues of believing a woman's voice. I mean, you got all these different things wrapped up in this one situation. And we don't know. Suppose this guy, Tory Lanez, and I'm sure he may not wanted to shoot her to hurt her, but suppose he really is looking at some time. Maybe he gets 20 years for making some dumb decisions. But maybe the judge said, you know what? Because you're an artist, I'm tired of you black artists always making, you put out this type of music, you want to live this type of life. Boom, I'm gonna throw the book at you.
We can't minimize the violence.
And then we're gonna look at the culture, and then those of us in the culture, we're gonna be like, man, that's messed up. That's wrong.
Yeah. We have a tendency to want to look at again the trivial, peripheral sides of the stories that are they're more salacious and hot tea and all that. But we really got to look at the real issue here, which is this was an act of violence, and whoever committed that act of violence should be held accountable.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's switch gears. Yep. Let's talk about horoscopes and astrology. Many of you say, well, what? But do you know that there is a social media trend right now where everybody is talking about horoscopes and astrology? Everybody can tell you, I'm a Taurus, and people say, oh, I've been with Tauruses. We're going to talk about that and how it has affected how we see ourselves and how we see other people. Stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
So, folks, if you have found yourself scrolling through social media, I'm sure that you have seen there are a number of mentions about astrology and horoscopes to the point where it is at an all-time high, folks. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about what Google Trends have to say. But we can all attest to the fact that there has been a heightened interest in trying to figure out the characteristics of other people and ourselves in the process. This isn't just by happenstance or coincidence, folks. Take a look at here. This is this comes from according to Google Trends, and this conversation comes from a piece from Essence magazine, where they're talking about social media has ruined horoscopes, and I'm even going to throw out there, has it even ruined how we view other people? According to the latest op-ed, it said interest in horoscopes has hit a crescendo. It's almost mandatory to meet someone, whether platonic or romantic, and ask them about their zodiac sign. We're overjoyed when a new friend tells us they too are an earth sign, whereas we silently start planning our exit when a date tells us they are fire sign, because mutable and fixed don't mix. And it's not surprising, thanks to the omnipresence of horoscopes and astrology on social media, interest in the signs and planet hit a 10-year high in 2020, according to Google Trends. Now, the writer says, what used to be a very niche, almost existential way for people to learn more about themselves in this expansive universe has become the only thing I ever need to know about you. It tells me if we can be friends or are sexually compatible, and confirms any preconceived notions I may have had. Everyone is now very aware of the characteristics of their sign and others. Before getting to know someone, people use little information about your sign to determine if you're worthy of their time. It's a bit unhealthy and toxic. Wow. This is coming from Essence. It says, how social media ruined horoscopes for me. This is coming from an op-ed that was printed. And it brought me to wonder about this phenomenon that we're seeing on social media, folks, where you see memes, you see reels, TikTokers. Everybody has an opinion about various signs in the astrology piece, and many people are just wondering: is it helping or hurtful? Helpful or hurtful? Take a look, also, folks. I want to bring Suzette back into this, because Suzette, have you been seeing this on social media? This greater interest for understanding people through horoscope. I've seen it everywhere.
It's everywhere, and it's annoying.
Everywhere.
It's kind of annoying to me. Can I admit that? I was asking my parents about this.
Yes, Queen.
Like,
yes, you can.
It's almost like the 70s all over. They said they was really into it in the 70s too. Y'all speak up if you know about that. I don't know firsthand, but my parents are like, what's old is new again. It has become kind of overwhelmingly a part of what we think we can judge people by. And I get it that people are trying to realize, there are patterns within people or ways that we can understand this world and the people in it a little bit better. But I think sometimes it's getting out of hand. It's almost like you're discounting people before you even know it. I've had people introduce themselves and ask me what my sign is, and then like tell me all these characteristics, which are not me. And again, people who know me would still agree it's not me. Even though it's not just me thinking it's not me. It's not me. And I think sometimes we're probably going to miss good connections or blessings or relationships, even if we're going to stay so tethered to this is what something says. Like, I think there's some truth to it. I think there can be, but I think also sometimes we're taking things a little bit too far into the extreme and feeling as if we know everything about a person just by their birth date. I think we have to be very careful that we don't prejudge people too quickly when this is like made up by like random people like me and you, and was intended for entertainment a lot of times. So you got to be very careful.
It's becoming, and here's the thing. This is the other part about it. It has become like the new spiritual, the new religion.
I thought we had, you know.
No. Here's the thing. Like, look,
not for everybody.
Not for everybody, obviously, right? But here's look, check. Like, I understand, and this is something that I'm seeing, is particularly among young Black women, right? And I'm just saying, I'm around young Black women in the sense of like, you know, you got all these women around who I see kind of like reposting memes and things like that. And I think that everybody is seeking some sort of guidance through life, right? So this is a yearning. This comes out of a yearning. I think the interest comes out of a yearning that people have to want to be understood, to want to be seen, and to want to feel like there is some greater force in their lives that they can live by and they can be guided by to help them make better decisions, right? And this is one of the quotes that the writer puts in this piece, which I thought was absolutely important, is that she said, while horoscopes are a funny way to learn about ourselves and others, social media has shifted their intention from helping us connect deeper to categorizing us apart.
Absolutely.
So the moment that you start to, like, once people find out that I'm an earth sign, you're an earth sign. Oh my gosh. You're a Taurus man. Oh my gosh. Wow. I've met a Taurus man.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I really think I think social media has brought out this desire for like deeper, non-traditional spiritualism, especially among Black people. Now that we can make these communities and we can talk about, you know, you filling up your rocks on the full moon and Beyonce told y'all to go do that. I think there's this idea that, you know, there's a harmfulness to traditional religion, and that there's something deeper that is more akin to our African heritage that people want to become tapped into or be a part of, and that there's a distrust of West and there's more love for Eastern philosophies, et cetera, et cetera. So I get it. I've seen a lot more Black people into things like Reiki and other things that at first, like a year ago or even before pandemic, when I was first hearing about these things, I'm like, okay, we into a lot of these other or some of us are into a lot of these other modalities and saying, you know, we were traditionally in our country very much Christian, mostly of the Baptist hilt, but there are people who are dissatisfied or want more from their philosophy, their religious philosophy, or they're looking for a spiritual, non-religious philosophy. So they're going out and they're seeking, they're going into other places. And I'm seeing Black girls or Black women on, you know, Instagram hitting chimes and doing sound therapy and doing all kinds of stuff, more into acupuncture and cupping and all these other alternative, some people would even call it new age type beliefs. So I don't know if it's permeating the culture deeply. I definitely see it as a trend more among younger parts of our community, and where they're like, nope, don't give me Christ, don't give me Jesus. I want to, you know, wear my locks, wear my turban, and light my incense and say my affirmations or whatever.
Well, see, that's the part, and again, this is why I think we needed to have a conversation about it. Because to me, Suzette, it's a sign that people are not happy about quote unquote organized religion, right? People, and I'm saying particularly the next generation. If you talk to anybody under the age of 40 today, right? People will tell you, I believe in God, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious.
Not religious, yep.
Right.
Very common.
And that means that what? You don't go to a particular faith, house of worship, but you are open to learning more about God's essential truths, right? And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I actually think that this is because religion has been sullied by so many, paternalistic, racist type of interpretations, especially when it comes to black men and women in this country, right? I'm always surprised.
Sexual predators
and the whole nine. I'm always surprised that black people are as religious as we are, considering how a lot of our enslavement and our oppression has been in the name of religion. So I'm not mad that a person wants to venture out of the organized religious space. What I do, though, think that we should have a conversation about is, what does the next space of consciousness, whether it's God consciousness or self-consciousness and self-growth and development, what does that look like? And I think that's where astrology, that's where horoscopes, people are trying to figure out what their purpose in life. And one of our culture crew members brought this point up. Since COVID, you question a lot of things. I think we're all questioning, like, what are we really here for? What are we really supposed to be doing? When we're talking about these connections that we want to make with people, these genuine connections, like, what does that actually mean? And it's coming out of a real space, because I think a lot of people are feeling alone. I think a lot of people are feeling like they're not appreciated and valued, or quote unquote seen for who they are. And they feel like they have to conform to some other standard of beauty or conform to some other standard of being. So I think this is a pushback on all of that. It's just an interesting phenomenon to see expressed on social media, where a lot of people are saying, you know what, let me check my astrology, let me check the horoscope, and using that as a guide for their day, or using it as a guide for their love life or for their professional life. This is really interesting to me.
People used to check the Bible, check the Quran, check whatever they need to check.
Right.
What I think it is, I don't know. I agree with you that, especially during the pandemic, but even before then, we started seeing a lot more of this holistic or African spiritualism, or at least being more visible. Because again, you're not sure if it's more people or if the algorithm is just shoving more people in your face every day. So when we're looking at this, I think I understand the attempt. And going back to your point, I just wanted to point out, even though people use things like Christianity for evil, does not deny that it holds many truth, in my opinion. So I can separate that. I can separate a lot of times what has been kind of the destructive path of those who say that they follow God and do works in his name. And truthfully, if they read this book, everything or some of what they are doing definitely goes against the laws of God, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is that it's so open to interpretation, or that, as we just pointed out, there's so many shortcomings in the last even 20, 30 years that have been high profile, church folk, if you will, pastors, preachers, rest in peace. I'm not going to call all their names, but some of them who have gone on who, were found out to just be hypocrites. So there's this sense that, but I can't trust this thing. I want to, or maybe there's truth there, but there has to be, some other alternatives. And I think we're seeing, especially with Gen Z, more open in our community. Again, as we're talking about age differences and generational differences, I would definitely say the cornerstone in our community still remains, the majority of our community still remains the church and Judeo-Christian teachings. But I'm just going to say, in this regard, when it comes to these horoscopes, I'm tired of y'all being like, oh, there she go. There go that Scorpio, or hey, there she go, that Cancer, or whatever. No, I think sometimes we get kind of extreme and carried away, and thinking that everything that a person does is aligned with your preconceived notion about that sign. And again, y'all might miss y'all wives or y'all husbands because you think air and water don't mix, or you think this month and that month not supposed to be together. I think you have to be very careful and just kind of take it among many factors, or take it with a grain of salt, so that you're not making your whole life determinations on what a staff writer at Name the Magazine is just paid to come up with.
Right. And I think to that point, you making that sometimes, like, I love social science. There is a field of science that studies human behavior, human thought. There's social science, right? There's decision-making science, right? So we tend to believe that a lot of the ways that we are, of course, is wrapped up in your genetics, right? But then there's the other part of it, when you're making decisions about personal life or professional life, when you are trying to figure out who the best person to be your potential partner in life and all of these things, a lot of these things are based upon your conditioning and not just based upon the stars. It's based upon how you make decisions, how we have been taught to make decisions, how we have been taught to choose. I mean, there are fields of science about this, and I think that's the part that we can't completely exclude from this conversation, right? That life exists because you got the spirit, but then you also have the science of it. And I'm not talking about the traditional science. I'm talking about understanding the science of thinking, the understanding the science. And I study this stuff like in my off time, you know what I mean?
It's the nature versus nurture and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
We don't understand. Like we really, and I'm saying, not gonna say we don't, but I think we underestimate the power of influence that our family has on our decision making, the power of influence on what we've been taught about money, the power of influence about, that racism and other social ills have on our thinking and on our psychology and how we see ourselves. We don't go too deep, right? And the crazy part about the irony of all of this, Suzette, is as deep as we go, we're afraid to go too deep with another person. So when we make a connection, the moment we start catching feelings, we dip out of the connection.
Oh, he a Taurus. He can't be my boyfriend. But to your point, even to the social conditioning point, that I think is also reflected in the less, which I say, the parts of our community that are not seeking out refuge in the church once like it used to be. I have so many cousins who are Gen X with kids who did not bring their kids to church, or did to a certain point, and then after, like, say, middle school, didn't really, follow up and make them kind of stay, get confirmed, or get baptized, or any of these things that were like a must for several of us who grew up 80s babies, 70s babies set up, where a church was like at the root, at the backbone of your daily activity, of your weekly activity, Monday through Friday. Right. It was just, you had Bible study, choir rehearsal, children's church, women's meeting, youth group, something was going on. So the fact that our conditioning has shifted away from kind of religious kind of center piece of it all. And again, that's not true for everybody. We still have, the majority of our community still seeks refuge there. But the fact that, again, as we are seeing, for whatever reason, nature and nurture, this shift away from maybe traditional, maybe your parents did not give you any kind of background when it comes to your religious thought, and you're seeking and you're trying to figure it all out. And then there's the internet and there's social media trying to tell you this is how you do it. But again, it shocks me sometimes how even when I do programs and things like that, whether there's public prayer, when there's a majority Black audience, some people are really down with it and they kind of think of it as a cultural norm, depending on the event. And then the other people have come to me afterwards and been like, why do we have to pray just because it's a Black event? And I'm like, oh, okay. So we have, that's a minority, but there's a difference of an opinion there where we can't assume, again, everybody has that same value system alignment depending on how they were raised and kind of the new conditions under which people are being raised. So they're just trying to figure it out. I get it.
I think
but don't overdo
that's what it comes down to. We're all on a path. We're all on a journey. And we're all trying to figure this thing called life out at this point, right? Absolutely. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's shift gears. I got Trends Posting doing the most up next. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shots.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, it's time for Trends, Post, and Doing the Most, where we tell you about trending topics that are just people are discussing right now on social media. Let's bring in our culture crew member, Suzette Speaks. All right, Suzette, here's some trending topics. This is something that I've seen happening. First and foremost, we want to give a big shout out and condolences to the family of DJ Stephen Twitch Boss, who unfortunately took his own life. He serves as the DJ for the Ellen DeGeneres show, and he was regarded as a very kind, warm, type of man. He died at the age of 40 by suicide, and Ellen has put out the statement saying she is simply heartbroken. I don't know, Suzette, what type of discussion we can have about Twitch in this situation, because suicide means a lot of different things to different groups of people. So this is really a hard one. Our prayers and our condolences go out to his family, but this is something because apparently he had some mental health issues, and so I don't know.
Yeah, I would first of all just want to remember him for his work.
Yeah.
This man impacted culture. I remember him from the So You Think You Can Dance competition. I was watching it back, and I believe it was like 2008 when he became kind of this rising star in the dance world. His pop and his lock and his movement, again, which originated from us here in the United States, Black culture here in the United States, and how he brought that even more so, the throwbacks to the 70s, 80s, and 90s that started happening then. And that style of dancing, again, became even more popularized around the world than it was thanks to him and that competition. Seeing him every day on Ellen DeGeneres when I was able to watch was also a joy. The self-expression, the art of his movement was just so beautiful to watch. So he was also in a couple movies. I know he had made some appearances there. So gone too soon, a career cut short, person of great potential, father of 3, married another competitor from one of the shows that he was on, and was seemingly, living the dream. But we don't really know sometimes what happens behind closed doors or within the minds of those that we love. So I know more will come out about this. I'm not really able to speak on what, his possible mental health issues and challenges were, as you mentioned, but I think it does allow us to kind of open the conversation about, making space for mental health discussions, as well as therapy for especially Black men. I think sometimes, again, we have done a better job in our community just kind of talking about it, but that encouragement that my brother, I'll get you an appointment, or you can have a free visit on me, or finding programs in which they can get, sometimes the cost barrier is a problem depending on economics of a person. But I think we have to especially make hold space for when men can and do show emotion, or show this feeling of insecurity or even depression or anything else. Sometimes they are shunned or laughed at or told man up, even the grown-ups, right? Not just the children. So we have to do a better job as a community of making space for Black men and their emotions and their feelings and what they go through and how they process it, and hopefully offering them some healthy tools to process it so things like this unfortunately don't happen.
Absolutely. Corinna, who is one of our online culture crew members, Corinna said, be kind. So many folks are hiding pain behind the guise of a smile. And I'm right there with you, Corinna. Thank you for posting that. Real Brooklyn, my guy, you said, I heard about this news today. You just never know what a person is going through. It must have been unbearable to decide to leave his beautiful kids. Hug and listen to the ones you love always. Yeah. And that's the hard part. I think that's the hard part. I mean, he took his own life. He felt like he could not bear to go on. And, you know, I'm sure that there's going to be some pain about that from his wife, from his children. Like, why didn't this daddy, you know, there's a sense of like, why did daddy decide to end things the way he did instead of talking about it, talking through it? You know what I mean? So that's a very, very hard pill to swallow.
There, we can use it also to promote the National Mental Health Hotline. That is up and running. I think sometimes also, you know, we don't think about, or I guess the person is in such pain they can't think about the residual effects something like this can have on a family, or what it can do, you know, onto second and third generation. You know, this is something that kind of sticks with you, but we got to remember you cannot blame yourself. Oftentimes what people are going through are, you know, hidden struggles. We have to make medicine normalized. If you need stabilization through medication, that's okay. You're not crazy. Sometimes you're just born where your brain is not firing the right chemicals at the right time to tell you what to do and to regulate your mood. And sometimes we need that. So again, we have to make space for those conversations within our families and our community at large. Absolutely.
So again, our condolences go out to the family of DJ Stevens, Twitch boss. Very quickly, on the other side, on a lighter note, just want to let everybody know Kevin Durant and Charles Barkley, two NBA superstars, are deciding to move forward and giving back to their community. Kevin Durant, of course, who hails from the DMV, he's giving $500,000 to an HBCU, Bowie State University, and Charles Barkley, he's decided to put some money where his mouth is. He's giving $1 million each to schools, including a Jackson State University. He's also giving money to Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach, $1 million each. So big shout out to Kevin Durant and Charles Barkley for giving back to HBCUs, especially since HBCUs are at the forefront of the conversation with Deion Sanders' situation and so many other things that are happening. HBCUs need their support. So big shout out to both Kevin Durant and Charles Barkley on that one, Suzette.
Here.
That's what we needed to do. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. Suzette, thank you so much as always. You can check Suzette Speaks Out here on The Culture every Wednesday, folks, to have her analysis from everything from law to culture. We always appreciate her. We love her voice, and we're happy to have her as one of our new culture crew members. So, Suzette, thank you for being so good for the culture, sis.
Thank you so much, Faraji. Y'all check out my YouTube channel, Suzette Speaks, on YouTube and on Instagram and on Facebook and all that good stuff. So check me out.
Bingo!
Put it up. Okay, thank y'all. Go ahead and subscribe, please. I'm growing.
Make sure y'all follow her. She talks about a host of issues, and she is dynamic. So that's why we had to bring her on the show. Suzette, thank you so much. We truly appreciate it.
See you guys next week. Thank you.
Peace. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank y'all for y'all continued support of us here at the Black Star Network and on The Culture. Make sure you go to our website, blackstarnetwork.com, get all the latest news and information, support us financially and otherwise when we share content. Make sure that you let your friends and family know that they can support us. And also follow us on all social media platforms at Black Star Network. And also while you're on social media, follow yours truly, me, Faraji Muhammad, at The Real Faraji on IG and Faraji on Twitter. That's going to do it for me. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow. Stay tuned. Up next is RMU streaming live here on the Black Star Network. Otherwise, I'll look forward to checking in with you tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.